In this video, I'm going to be talking about breeding, and everything I'm talking about is from the past. It may sound like I'm talking about the present, but nothing's meant for illegal purposes. I'm not teaching anything to anybody to do anything illegal, but there is a connection between the past and the present. And with breeding, as I mentioned before, it's across the board. The techniques, methods don't change. But the question always comes up, not question, but questions. What do I breed to? How do I breed? What goes best with this? What goes best with that? And one of the reasons why I advise people to study the history of the breed, especially if you're going to become a breeder. Sometimes it's just people's interest. They like to know where things came from, how they developed. But with breeding, it's important because if you study the past, it'll give you an idea of what they did and why they did it, and the results of those two things. And with breeding, you know, in any functional, sporting, working, even just if you want to call it an everyday dog, a pet, there's reasons you do things to get the results you want, the type of animal you want. Some of the stuff in the past don't matter. It's irrelevant today, and even the dogs of the past don't matter because they're so far back, their influence isn't there anymore. But what you can do by keeping those traits from the past is use individuals that retain them, and as you move forward, you keep using the individuals that can produce those same traits. But especially those people starting out, and maybe some people that are not sure what to do, you get stuck at a certain point or you're not sure what to do, you have to have a program first. I talk about standards all the time. Standards within the dogs. You have to have those same standards with your breeding program. And to do that, you have to know the individuals that you're breeding. You have to know their ancestors, and if you got it from a breeder, you need to get as much information as you can from that person. Unfortunately, some people don't even know where the traits of their own dogs come from. They may know the traits that their dogs have, but they don't know where it came from because they don't have that knowledge of the ancestors within their own dog's pedigree. Now, if you go first, second, third, even to the fourth generation, that's all the information you need. But it helps because, like I said, as you move forward, you're keeping those traits. And in future breedings, if you know certain traits are coming from a certain line or certain dogs within a certain line, you can repeat those same methods over and over again. When you look to the past, you're going to see all kinds of breeding methods. You're going to see inbreeding, outcrossing, line breeding, loose line breeding, heavy on one dog, heavy on a different dog, the same family of dogs within a pedigree. It could be on one side of the pedigree, the top. It could be on the other side of the pedigree, the bottom. It could be on both sides. And what you're trying to do is develop the type of family of dogs that you want, the type of dogs that you want within your family, and have consistency in doing so. What that does, it helps you it'll stop the guesswork. Because if you don't have a program set first, before you make one breeding, then you don't know what to do going forward. If you don't have a particular way of focusing on certain individuals or certain bloodlines and certain traits, and you don't know how to keep those traits and bloodlines and families and dogs within their family going, that's where you get stuck. You got to get to the point where you're saying, well, what should I do here? Well, what should I do there? Well, what's the best way to go with this and what's the best way to go with that? If you have standards, those standards will tell you what to do. When you're losing something, you add something to it, and that could be within your own family of dog. It doesn't have to be an outside dog. If it is an outside dog, then you need all that information from that outside dog also to know if that's a good choice to put within your family of dogs. And like I said, a lot of people, well, what about this? Well, what about that? Well, if there's consistency with what you're asking about, then I would say go with it. But if you're looking at what about this and what about that, and they're excuses or anomalies or not the norm, then that's where you might not get the results you want. Just because a dog did something or produced something doesn't mean that it's a good producer that came from good producers. So that's one standard that I use. The dogs that I'm breeding to in the moment, back then in the moment, had to have certain standards. They had to be a good dog. Their littermates had to be good dogs. Their parents had to be good dogs. The grandparents had to be good dogs. And if it's a dog you're breeding the first or second time, the parents and grandparents had to be good producers. That's what helps you keep that consistency going of producing dogs. And it might seem like I'm jumping. I got a bunch of notes here that I wrote down just on the fly. So if it looks like I'm jumping back and forth, don't trip, because it's all related anyways. So, you make a breeding and it doesn't work. You have to be able to know why that particular breeding didn't work. And once you come to that conclusion, it may mean you need to go in a different direction, or you need to use a different dog. If you like that bloodline, that just may not be the dog within that bloodline that you're going to breed to. Could be his brother, could be a different ancestor, a cousin, half brother. It just depends on what the breeding shows you. And that's where knowing all those traits and knowing the families and the bloodlines come into play. Because if it's something that's not consistent with that family of dogs, then it's an anomaly. Then it's not an excuse, but it's not the norm. It's something that's in the dog, of course, but it's not particular with that family of dogs. Like Clayton Blood, the dog I talk about all the time. Good dog, 2-time winner, won an hour, 39, 243. But he didn't follow the traits of the family that I had, which is why I didn't breed to him. Took nothing away from him. He was a very good dog, very game dog, had a lot of good traits, good air, smart, fast. But his style and his strength didn't follow the family traits, which is why I didn't breed to him. Now maybe I should have, but that was my way of doing things. I didn't stray too much from the traits that I wanted or the type of dogs I wanted, because throwing something off like that in there could throw other things off too. May change the whole style of your dogs, may change the temperament, behavior, could reduce the strength in your dogs if that's something that you want in there. It could lessen the mouth because he didn't have much mouth, because dogs will throw what they are at the time. I'll get into that a little bit later if I remember. And when you're making these decisions, you have to get to the point where you're not undecisive. You're going with this, you're going to play it out, do it and see how it plays out. And if it works, you stick with it. If it doesn't, that's when you might want to go a different direction or use a different individual or try something else. It doesn't have to mean try something new. It doesn't even mean you have to bring an outside dog in. but it does mean that you might remove that individual from your program, because that's part of it too. You're going to make some breedings that don't work, and rather than culling them out of the program, people will breed them in the hopes that in the next generation they'll throw something. I don't like breeding that way. I like to be consistent every generation, and there's a reason for that. One of the reasons is uh, one of the reasons for that is the dog is going to throw what they are at that particular time. And I'll use this analogy. It's not 100%, but it can give you consistency. Everybody likes to talk about gameness. I'll use gameness. In one sense, gameness breeds gameness. Meaning, if you use a dog that has gameness and he shows the ability to throw that trait, you'll do well by sticking with him. If he doesn't, and it matters which bitch you use to, preferably she's game too. Just that analogy. If he doesn't, there's a couple of reasons why. If that breeding doesn't produce gameness and you see the traits coming from his side, and he's a game dog, but he didn't throw it in that particular litter, it could be that it just didn't click. The genes didn't come together. Or it could mean what's behind him doesn't have gameness. There's an individual or individuals that don't have it, and that's what he's throwing. He's not throwing himself, he's throwing what's behind him. Or, like I said, it just didn't click. That happens. So you could use that analogy with people talk about curs or cold dogs that produce good dogs and game dogs. The cur is not throwing himself because he quit. He's throwing the game dogs that are behind him. So in that respect, when you breed a cur and he throws game dogs, at some point in the next generation or after that, or depending on how you breed them, that's going to produce cur dogs. So that's part of the standard. You're trying to eliminate those faults by not including them in your program. And there's a lot of dogs that have done that. But ultimately, that cur stuff is going to keep coming back and keep coming back. It's not going to lessen or even out or anything like that. You're never going to get 100%. But you don't want to increase it by including it in there just because the dog has other good traits in it. If that's the basis for the breed, then why would you throw something in there that goes against that base? And that could be used in today's time as well. And everything I talk about, you know, what we did in the past and people before me in 200 years and all that competition, all that displays of gameness, all that ability and all that. The dogs of today are the result of all that in the past. So even though we can't do what we used to do in the past, those other aspects of the dog, including heart when they pull weight, including, and it's not the same, I'm not saying it's the same, but that's part of it. And that athletic ability and strength and speed and good air is the result of all those dogs in the past. You wouldn't be able to go hunting with pit bulls or wall climb or weight pull or flirt pole or treadmill race or lure course or obstacle race or any other thing you can think of, catch dogs, if those dogs weren't developed from the game dogs of the past. That past is what gives you the good quality traits of the dogs that you have in the present. So in that respect, yeah, the past matters a lot. Because when you don't have those standards, they're going to lose all these good traits that they have, like so many other breeds have. And it's going to be a shell and not a representative of its ancestors. So all the breeding methods work. So sometimes I'm asked, what's the best way to breed in this and that? And I tell people there is no best way because all of them have proven to work. But it's up to you to decide which ones work best for you. How do you get the results you want? By using the different breeding methods and techniques that you use. One could show better individuals bred a certain way as compared to this other way, but also both ways, or 3, 4 different, 5 different ways of breeding can give you consistent results. Just depends on what you want. And a lot of that has to do if you're breeding half brother and sister, or you're breeding father to daughter, or you're breeding mother to son. We want to capture certain traits. Half brother, half sister, you're capturing the traits of the sire if the sire is the sire of both from different females. If it's the same dam and different males, then you're trying to capture the dam's traits. So all the breeding techniques work. There's not one that doesn't. It just depends on the individual dogs you're using. And do they have the ability to throw the traits that they have that you want? Because they're all going to throw traits. It just depends on if they're the ones you want, and if you get consistency, and you have to see improvement over time as well. So I got some more notes here. Let me get into some examples. You know, when you go to breeders, or back in the day when we studied, you went and you had a base, a foundation bloodline or bloodlines that you liked, and you're going to build off of that. And any good breeder knows what their dogs have and don't have. And most will tell you all the good stuff about them, but there's very few that will tell you the faults that they have. But it's important to know the faults so that you can correct them. Now, they might not tell you, you might not know. If you start a breeding program, you're going to see it. But it's going to take longer, and then you're not going to be sure where it's coming from. You just know that those faults, just like those good qualities, are in your dog. And if you study the breedings of the past, or the way they put bloodlines together, you're going to see why they did what they did. That's what I mean by that. So I'll give a couple of examples. People know, they know I'm a Jeep guy, right? And I've said it's more of a honey bunch guy. And with my own dogs, I said some of them could be shy, some of them were destructive. But if you have heavy Jeep dogs, and anybody that has them has to admit this, if they don't, they're not, for whatever reason, because it looks bad or whatever. Some Jeep dogs don't have finish, and that's a quality that I really wanted in my dogs. One of the reasons, if you follow your history, Jeep didn't have finish himself. Doesn't mean he wasn't game, doesn't mean he wasn't rough. He was strong and fast and intense. But if you read his report, especially the one with Homer, he did not display that finish. And I've seen that in some of my dogs too, my Jeep dogs too. So knowing that, when you see Jeep dogs that have finish, well, where it's coming from? Where is it coming from? Why do they have it and others don't? It's coming from Honey Bunch, in my educated opinion. So if they don't have it, it's coming from Jeep. If they do have it, it's coming from Honey Bunch. And you keep the ones that have it. The ones that don't, you don't breed them. That's one of the ways to eliminate it. But you can't just keep doing that over and over. You just can't keep inbreeding over and over, or tight breeding over and over. So where did I get the finish from? Some of it, like I said, is in Honey Bunch. But my dogs also had Bully Son in them and some Rascal Jr. in them. Those dogs have finish. That's one of their pluses. That's why people like them, including that hard bite. So I'll use Stomper as an example. Stomper was Bully Son to Long's Tuffy. Hard biter, finish. Some of the Bully Son dogs, they're, if you want to say what faults they had, was they were kind of slow. Some of them are dumb, meaning they just single-minded, going like that after the same thing, same thing, same thing. They don't change up. They don't know how to get out of it. But one thing about the Stomper dogs compared to other Bully Son dogs is they're early starters. Because some dogs are known to be late starters and not hard workers. They're lazy. Stomper dogs were not like that. They were tough and strong and intense, a little bit slow, and they had that finish and that mouth. Stomper dogs, for me, they were the hardest biting Bully Son dogs overall, as compared to the Midnight Cowboy and the Bully Son Arch Missy stuff. Doesn't mean those other ones had hard bite, but they were consistently hard biters. I had that in some of my dogs in the past. I've seen it in several others. So what did I do? In my bloodlines, my standard was only use the Jeep dogs if they're heavy Jeep bred dogs that had finish. If I wanted to keep that finish going, I go to the Bully Son or the Eli side. You could use Skull, you could use Reno, you could use Stomper, you could use Midnight Cowboy stuff, you could use the Bully Son Arch Missy stuff, whether it was Lapace's Buster, which is a good example of that Arch Missy Bully Son blood. Like that, and you weed out the ones that have the undesirable traits that you don't want, and you keep the ones that have it. And over time, some of the people that I let my dogs go to, that's what they did. They added more of the Stomper stuff. They added more that had Midnight Cowboy relatives in there. They added some Skull stuff. And you see that in Mexico, where they started with all those same old Bully Son, Eli Jr., Brandy, and Bully Son, and Eli Jr.'s sister, Lupe, and Rascal's sister, Lady, and they had the Orphan Annie stuff. And as they move forward through time, they're adding the T-Bud stuff. They're adding the Skull stuff to keep that Eli, those traits going. They want that hard mouth. And that's one way to do it. That's one of the main reasons I added more Rascal to my stuff, because I needed more mouth. And eventually I probably would have added the Bully Son stuff. More of that. And, another example, or two other examples, would be the Red Boy Boleo. On the whole, they're known for being very game dogs. That's where you can get gameness from. Same thing with the Tombstone Red Baby stuff. A lot of those heavy Zeke dogs, Zeke Black Widow dogs, really known for gameness. And with the Red Boy dogs, maybe not a lot of intelligence. That may be a fault of theirs, or they may be destructive or something like that, or they bark all night. Boleo dogs, very intelligent dogs, not the hardest mouth dogs. Great air, a lot of heart, intensity. Some of them a little on the thin side, bone-wise. So they're knowing all these traits, and that goes to my recent point, is a breeder should know what the faults are in his dogs. And if you're offering dogs to the public or someone else, you should be able to tell them that. And it's not from a point of there's something wrong with them. It should be from a point, if you see this negative trait come out, try and eliminate it. Don't use that individual if it's a major fault for you. There's nothing wrong with that. That's what a good breeder does. Because myself, anybody else, we can tell you all the good traits. I kept speed and strength in my dogs. I kept intensity and gameness in my dogs. At the end, when I got out, I just needed more mouth, and had to keep that finish going. So there's all kinds of ways to breed, but if you don't have something set in your way of making your breedings, you're always going to be asking, well, what about this and what about that, and where should I go, and I don't know, and what's the best. You have to get to a point where you're away from all that, and you're going to have missteps along the way. Some things are not going to work. So when they don't work, what does your standard tell you to do? Whatever it tells you to do, that's what you follow. It takes the guesswork out of it. At the same time that you understand that things are not going to work, some things are not going to work, you understand there's a way to fix it. Or you know what to do about it when it doesn't work. You go with this other individual. You go this direction. You discard the individuals in that breeding. You cull them out of your breeding program. You don't breed to those dogs. Because that's skipping a generation. Yeah, good stuff has come from it. But that bad stuff will skip a generation too. That's why you need, in my opinion, you need consistency every generation. And the individuals themselves, what they retain, that's what they're going to throw. It could be they're throwing bad. If they're throwing good, then you should see it. So when you've seen stuff skip a generation, then it has to be that it's coming from the individuals behind the one that you're breeding to, because he's not throwing it. So you have to get to the point where he's throwing it too. So if you breed gameness to gameness to gameness to gameness, you're going to be consistently having game dogs. Mouth, 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 mouth. Yep. Air, 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 like that. Strength, speed, wrestling, balance, whatever it is. They're not all going to have everything in one dog. So you have to figure out what are the main ones that you need to keep consistent all the time. And when something starts to slip a little bit, maybe their air starts to go down, you throw that air back in there. Bone structure, boom, throw some more heavy bone. But when you do that, that dog that has air, what other traits does he have that match your dog's traits? So if he has good air, but he doesn't have speed, and speed is important to you, don't breed to him. If he has good air and he has speed, boom, it'll fit right with your program. If a dog has good bone structure and you want to increase your bone structure, but he's slow and dumb, you might not want to add that. Even though you'll get the bone structure, it might slow your dogs down, or it might take some of their intelligence away. So those are the things that are involved when you're breeding dogs. What are your standards? From which individuals are they coming from? And when you breed them, what do the results show you? And like I said, it takes away all that guesswork. That's pretty much covers all my notes. And the other thing is if you look, people talk about scatter breeding. This is scatter breeding, that's scatter breeding. Could be. When someone tells me, they got Red Boy Jocko Jeep, Red Boy Mayday, Tombstone Bolio, Carver, whatever. To me, it sounds like scatter breeding. So what I have to look for is, where's the commonality in all those bloodlines? In the past, were there relatives that are in there? Are there bloodlines that are common within them? And then I'll determine whether it's scatter breeding or not. Because if you look in the past, what you see are patterns like this. You'll see certain dogs like Kager or Fly of Panama or the gas house dog, or you'll see pincher, and you'll see them in the pedigree here and there in the pedigree. Then you have all this other stuff in there, even the name, breeder's name, you never even heard of. So we know the famous dogs that are mentioned, but we may not know those other ones. So what I have to do is go back and see if they're related to those famous dogs, or if they're from families of dogs that are related to those dogs, meaning, was Leitner and Armitage, were they trading dogs back and forth? Was Komasinski getting Armitage dogs and Colby dogs and making breedings with those? Something along those lines. Particular dogs don't have to be heavy within the bloodline, but it's common on both sides of the pedigrees. And then I just have to search and see if there's those other dogs that I'm not real familiar with. Is there commonalities in there? And a lot of times the commonality is just they're breeding English to Irish dogs. And sometimes it's relatives that they're putting together in a line breeding fashion. Sometimes they're making an outcross at one point, and then they're going back to this bloodline or this family of dogs in the next generation. So we talk about scatter breeding and this and that that people do now, but in the past, if you look at a lot of the pedigrees, that's what it looks like they were doing too, even though they weren't, because there weren't as many dogs as there are now. Back then there weren't as many, so it's generally the same breeders breeding amongst themselves. If you have Leitner and Donovan and Corcoran, and you have Tudor and Komasinski and Armitage and Colby, and in the past you see some Redican, or you see some Jerry or Williams, like that, Corvino, they're kind of all mixing their dogs together. So there's a lot of commonality that way, even though the names are different and the dogs' names are different. You see certain patterns that they did. And that's what you're going to do when you develop your own family of dogs. You're going to start making these patterns, and when you see your own patterns, how they're made, and you follow the ones that are most successful, you'll see them being repeated over and over again. The ones that work the best for you. But like I said, every one has worked. It just depends on who's making the breedings, why they did it, and what did they do with their dogs. So the same can be done in today's world. Why do you have the dogs you have? And do you know everything about them? And how much do you know about their ancestry? And how do you keep repeating and having those traits as you move forward? You don't have to lose them. You can make the individuals better. You can increase the number of good dogs within a litter, which will improve the breed and at least improve your dogs. That's evolution. That's how things get better. And now that we have all this information, that can help you too. And if you think it's important to learn about genetics, do so. I think reading books on animal husbandry are important because it doesn't just cover breeding. It's feeding and maintenance and care and epigenetics and housing, vaccinations, all that stuff. And all that should be involved in your breeding program. The health and vigor and youth and vitality, all of that should be taken into consideration when you're choosing the individuals you do to breed. It's all connected. So that's a little bit on breeding. I'll probably cover more, maybe get a little bit more specific on some stuff. I'm going to do some conditioning stuff. I'm going to have some new interviews and repeat interviews. It's an ongoing thing. I really love what I'm doing, and I couldn't do it without your guys' support. Thanks for all the purchases, all that stuff. Once again, if you have a comment, put it in there. I really enjoy reading the comments, and I love the input and the camaraderie, if you will. So we'll just keep it rolling. Thank you very much.